Since we're not texturing this sword in this lesson, our last thing we need to do is simply to determine whether edges will be drawn as hard or soft. And this is an important step here because if you don't do it, then your model's going to look really strange. If you look at this sword here, there's no real definition to it. It looks kind of funky. There's weird parts of it. It doesn't have the sort of sharp edge that we expect it to. Likewise here, we look at our handle here, there are some parts that look faceted and other parts that look rounded. And this has completely everything to do with the edge smoothing. And this is also known as vertex normals. It has to do with how the lighting is calculated and whether there's a gradient applied across an edge or not. And it works really differently in 3ds Max than it does in most other programs. And it's kind of unfortunate, but it still works. You just have to go through a slightly different process and mindset. What happens under the hood with 3ds Max is there are things called smoothing groups. And in order to make sure that you get a nice smoothed area, then all of those polygons need to be in the same smoothing group. And where you want there to be a hard edge, the adjoining polygons should be in a different smoothing group. All right, so let's do this. So the easiest thing to do is to do automatic smoothing. And in fact, our guard here is a perfect candidate for that. If we get in real close, you'll see that there are some faceted areas here. And we can fix this one really easily. Just select it and then make sure that you're in modify mode. And over here, you will see properties. I'm still in object mode. And you'll see hard, smooth, and smooth 30. If you click hard, then all of the facets will be made hard. If I deselect that, we can see this. And just so that it's easier for us to see this from now on, what I'm going to do is go into the configuration dialog for the viewport. Click on the plus sign, go to configure viewports, and turn selection brackets on, and turn display selected with edged faces off. That way we can have something selected and not see the wireframes, and then be able to tell whether it's smooth or not. All right, so click OK. Now I can select that, and I got the selection brackets, and it is selected, and I can play around, and I can actually see what I'm doing now. So this is with all hard on the entire object. So all the edges have been made hard. Then we've got smooth, which means all the edges will be made soft. And it looks rounded, and weirdly so. Not good. There's kind of issues here. And if you have a model that looks like this, where, for example, maybe you have a box that's got really weird black spots on it and things, it's probably the edge smoothing or polygon vertex normals. Finally, here you'll see smooth 30, and what that'll do is it'll test the angle between adjacent faces or polygons. And if it's greater than 30 degrees, then it'll be made a hard edge. And if it's less than 30 degrees, it'll be made a soft edge. Click that. And that actually works really well in this particular case. We don't need to do anything more to that because all the areas that are sort of more flat are going to be made soft or smoothed. And the areas where we've got a greater than 30 degree angle, like on these chamfers, those edges will be made hard. All right, that one was easy. Now let's look at the sword blade itself. Get that selected and maybe start off with smooth 30 and see what that does. And really didn't do anything because all of these faces are under 30 degrees, so everything's smooth. Let's make them all hard edge then. And that's looking better. You can see now that scallop is certainly visible at this point. But there's some other issues here, like you'll see places that are faceted that we don't want to be. Now, to fix this up, we need to kind of go into a manual mode. And let's go into polygon subobject mode. And we can select some of these polygon faces. And what we want to do here is, in fact, make, for example, all of these in one smoothing group so that we don't see this edge, this one, or this one. That's the quirky thing about 3ds Max. You have to actually select not just these polygons, but in fact this one as well, in order to make sure that this edge gets drawn correctly as softened. The other weird thing that you're going to have to sort of cope with is that these buttons are all defaulted to work on the entire object, which is very strange from an interface perspective. It just wants to apply the command to everything, regardless of what you have selected or not, which kind of defies logic because we're in a subobject mode for a reason. What you have to do to work around this is click on the little arrow and then choose Smooth Selected. And now from now on, you will see there's a little cursor arrow there. From now on, that button will only operate on the selected polygons, which is what we need 100% of the time. All right, so deselect that. Now you can see that, in fact, in that area, we've fixed the issue. It looks pretty good now. All right, so in the adjoining area next to it, you can see we're still having that issue. So we'll need to select those polygon faces with the Control key and click Smooth. And we'll need to do that all around. So for example, in this area here, we want this all to be one sort of continuous flat area, including these. So I've got to select all of them and then click Smooth and then deselect the object so you can see the result. Likewise here with these, get all of those selected and then click Smooth Selected and then deselect it to make sure it's actually working. That's the process. We have to do this manually for all of these and Smooth Selected. I'm not going to do the bottom, but in real production we would need to do the bottom, but that's enough for now. We can see the result of having properly smoothed certain polygons and not others. Same thing goes here. We just have a little bit more challenge with this because we have to kind of creatively figure out what areas need to be smoothed with other areas or not. But that'll give me an opportunity to show you one other cool little feature. Let's go ahead and exit out of subobject mode for the blade so that we can then select the handle, go back into subobject polygon mode. And in my case, I happen to be in soft selection mode because that's what I was in last time I used the polygon subobject mode. So I want to exit out of the soft selection mode. And what I wanted to show you is that you can select a whole polygon loop. That'll make your life a little bit easier. So for example, you can see this area here. If I just select one of those polygons and then click on loop here, that'll select all of them in a loop. And it's not always perfect. You can see here that it selected some polygons in areas that we don't want. So it's not a perfect world, but then you can go ahead and just use the Alt key and deselect those that you don't want. So just Alt-clicking on those to deselect them. So with that little loop of polygons selected, then we can click on Smooth Selected and then click off of it, and you can see now that area has been smoothed. Okay, and then this area here, that's going to need some tender loving care too. So same sort of thing. Select one of those, and actually you can give 3ds Max a little hint sometimes by selecting two polygons next to each other and then clicking loop, and that'll often give it enough of a hint to be able to select what you want it to. So for example, I can do that here. I can select several polygons kind of in a row and then click loop, and it kind of knows what to do then. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting all of these so that then I can put them all into this same smoothing group. And that way they'll have faceting on these chamfer borders, but it'll be smoothed inside the chamfer. All right, and then likewise here with this, click on loop, and that'll add to the current selection. So with all of those selected now, I can go ahead and click on Smooth Selected and then deselect. And that's kind of what I was going for. I wanted to try to give that a little bit of definition there. So we've got all the smoothing done. I didn't do the bottom of the blade, but you can do that on your own. But basically now we've got our model created, and that completes our chapter on polygon modeling using the modeling ribbon, also known as graphite.